trapped on a dying planet. She was the enemy, but I had to trust her. The crash landing. Commander Reeve Thorne's head throbbed as consciousness slowly returned. The acrid smell of burning circuits filled his nostrils, and the taste of copper lingered on his tongue. Emergency lights pulsed red in the shattered cockpit of his scout ship, casting eerie shadows across the wreckage. He tried to move, wincing as pain lanced through his left side. Probably broken ribs. "System status," he croaked, his voice barely audible over the hissing of ruptured coolant lines. "Critical failure in all primary systems," the ship's AI responded, its usually smooth voice now fragmented and glitching. "Oxygen reserves at 48%, hull integrity compromised, communication array destroyed." Thorne forced himself to focus, pushing aside the pain. The mission had gone catastrophically wrong. What should have been a routine patrol along the contested border between Earth Alliance space and Veridian territory had turned into disaster when his ship was caught in an ambush. He remembered the sudden appearance of the Veridian warship, the desperate evasive maneuvers, the mad dash for the nearby planet's atmosphere hopping to lose his pursuers. "Location?" he asked, struggling to unbuckle his harness. "Unknown. Stellar cartography database damaged. Planetary analysis indicates Class 4 atmosphere with high sulfur content. Surface temperature, 42 degrees Celsius. Radiation levels elevated but within survivable parameters." A dying world, then. The planet's sun must be in the late stages of its life cycle, slowly cooking everything on the surface. Not ideal, but he could survive long enough to repair the communication system and signal for extraction. Thorne managed to free himself and stood unsteadily, taking stock of his supplies. His sidearm was still holstered, and the emergency kit appeared intact. He would need to salvage what he could before. A loud crash from outside froze him mid-thought. Someone, or something, was approaching the wreckage. Thorne drew his weapon and positioned himself beside the twisted emergency exit, ignoring the protest from his injured ribs. The outer hatch groaned as someone attempted to force it open. Thorne raised his blaster, finger hovering over the trigger. The door finally gave way with a metallic shriek, and a figure stumbled inside. Thorne's finger tightened on the trigger, then hesitated. It was a woman. No, not a woman. A Veridian. Her iridescent skin shimmered with a faint blue glow, distinctive vertical pupils dilating rapidly as they adjusted to the dim light of the cabin. She wore the sleek, carbon fiber armor of Veridian Special Forces, though hers was damaged and scorched. "Don't move," Thorne ordered, keeping his weapon trained on her. The Veridian's eyes narrowed, and her hand moved toward the holster at her hip. "I said don't move," Thorne barked, "hands where I can see them." For a tense moment he thought she would draw her weapon anyway. Then slowly she raised her hands. "Your ship is leaking radiation," she said, her voice carrying the musical cadence typical of her species. "It will attract predators. We need to leave." "We?" Thorne almost laughed. "There is no we, Veridian. Your people just tried to kill me." "My name is Nova," she replied coolly. "And if I wanted to kill you, Commander, you would already be dead." Thorne's gaze flickered to the insignia on her armor, Veridian Intelligence Division. A spy, then. Even worse. "My ship crashed 2 kilometers east," Nova continued. "Communications destroyed like yours." She nodded toward the ruined console. "This planet is dying, atmosphere degrading, tectonic instability increasing. Neither of us survives alone." As if to emphasize her point, the ground trembled beneath them, and somewhere in the distance, there was the sound of an explosion. Thorne glanced at his environmental scanner. The air outside was growing more toxic by the hour. "How do I know this isn't a trick?" he demanded. "You could have wingmen waiting to ambush me the moment I step outside." Nova's expression remained impassive. "My squadron was destroyed in the battle. Your Alliance fighters were, more resourceful than expected." Thorne felt a surge of pride at that. though it was quickly tempered by the realization that his own situation was hardly better. "If you will not cooperate," Nova said, turning toward the exit, "then we will both die separately on this rock." Another tremor shook the ship, stronger this time. Warning lights flashed on Thorne's scanner. The radiation levels were climbing. "Wait," he called as Nova reached the twisted doorway. Against his better judgment, he lowered his weapon slightly. "What's your plan?" Nova turned back, her alien features unreadable. "There is a settlement marked on my charts, abandoned mining colony, 15 kilometers west. It may have communication equipment or supplies for a long-range beacon." Thorne weighed his options. Alone, with limited supplies and an injured body, his chances of survival were slim. With Nova's help, enemy though she was, those chances improved. Marginally. "If I see you make one suspicious move," he warned, "I won't hesitate to shoot." Nova's lips curved in what might have been a smile. "Likewise, Commander." Reluctantly, Thorne gathered what supplies he could carry. Medical kit, rations, water purifier, and his sidearm with spare energy cells. Nova watched him silently, her posture alert but not overtly threatening. "Ready?" she asked when he had finished. Thorne took one last look at the ruined ship that had been his home for the past 3 years. "Lead the way," he said, knowing full well he might be following his enemy to his death. As they stepped outside, the harsh landscape of the dying planet greeted them. Cracked, ochre earth stretched toward the horizon, broken occasionally by twisted formations of blackened rock. The sky burned a sickly orange, the bloated sun hanging low and angry. In the distance, geysers of noxious gas erupted from fissures in the ground. "We need to move quickly," Nova said, checking a device on her wrist. "There's a storm approaching from the east, acid rain." Thorne nodded grimly, adjusting his breathing mask. "After you," he said, still keeping a cautious distance. As they set off across the hostile terrain, Thorne couldn't shake the feeling that he had made a terrible mistake. But watching Nova navigate the treacherous landscape ahead, moving with confident grace despite her injuries, he knew he had little choice. On this dying world, she was the enemy he had to trust. Hostile terrain. The acidic rain began just as they reached the shelter of a towering rock formation. Thorne watched as droplets splattered against the stone, hissing and leaving small pockmarks in their wake. Nova had been right about the storm, and if they'd been caught in it, their protective gear would have quickly deteriorated. "We'll wait here until it passes," Nova said, sliding down against the rock wall and checking her equipment. Her movements were careful, measured, and Thorne noticed she was favoring her right side. "You're injured," he observed, keeping his distance but watching her closely. Nova's vertical pupils constricted slightly. "Nothing serious. Shoulder dislocated during landing. Already reset." Thorne nodded, taking the opportunity to assess his own injuries. The pain in his ribs was still sharp but manageable. He had worse problems, like being stranded on a dying planet with a Viridian spy. "Why were you in that sector?" he asked, breaking the tense silence. "It's neutral territory under the Proxima Accords." Nova's expression remained unreadable. "I could ask you the same question, Commander." "Routine patrol," Thorne replied, the practiced lie coming easily. In truth, he had been transporting sensitive intelligence back to Earth Alliance headquarters, data about a potential Viridian superweapon, data that was now lost in his ship's damaged systems. "Of course," Nova said, her tone making it clear she didn't believe him. "Just as I was simply conducting scientific research." Thorne almost smiled despite himself. "Do all Viridian scientists carry military-grade disruptors?" A faint blue glow pulsed beneath Nova's skin, what passed for a blush among her species. "Dangerous universe," she replied. The rain intensified outside their shelter, creating a curtain of steaming liquid. Thorne checked his scanner, watching the atmospheric toxicity levels steadily rising. Even with their breathing apparatus, They wouldn't survive long-term exposure. "Your people believe we started the war," Nova said suddenly, her gaze fixed on the acidic downpour. "That Viridians attacked Earth colonies unprovoked." Thorne stiffened. "Didn't you? The massacre at New Harmony speaks for itself." "History written by survivors," Nova countered, her musical voice hardening. "Your alliance ships fired first at Vega Prime. Thousands of civilian lives lost." "That's Viridian propaganda," Thorne growled, though a flicker of doubt crossed his mind. The military records about Vega Prime had always been strangely classified, even to officers of his rank. Nova turned to face him fully, the bioluminescent patterns on her skin pulsing with emotion. "We are not so different, Commander. Both soldiers, both following orders, both told the other is the monster." Before Thorne could respond, a piercing screech cut through the sound of the rain. Both of them were on their feet instantly, weapons drawn. "What was that?" Thorne whispered, scanning the area outside their shelter. Nova's expression grew grim. "Scavengers, they hunt in packs, attracted to heat signatures." She gestured to her scanner. "3 approaching from the north, 2 more circling east." Thorne swore under his breath. "Options." "Limited," Nova replied, checking her weapon's charge. "Fight or run. Either way we're exposed." The screeching grew louder, joined by a chorus of answering calls. Through the thinning curtain of rain, Thorne caught glimpses of movement, large, low-slung shapes with multiple limbs skittering across the rocky terrain. "The rain's stopping," he observed. "If we move now, we might have a chance to reach those ridges." He pointed to a series of jagged formations about half a kilometer away. Nova nodded in agreement. "Higher ground, defensible position." "On my mark," Thorne said, mentally plotting their route. 3, 2, 1 now." They burst from their shelter into the open, boots slipping on the wet, corroded ground. The atmosphere burned Thorne's lungs despite his breathing apparatus, and he could feel the caustic air eating through his protective clothing. The first scavenger attacked from their right, a nightmarish creature with leathery, radiation-scarred skin and too many eyes. It launched itself at Nova with frightening speed. She pivoted smoothly, her disruptor firing twice. The creature shrieked and fell, its body convulsing. "Keep moving," she shouted as 2 more emerged from behind a cluster of rocks. Thorne fired at the closest one, his shot grazing its shoulder. The creature barely slowed. He fired again, hitting it squarely this time. It collapsed in a heap of twitching limbs. They ran, the uneven terrain making each step treacherous. Behind them, more screechers were gathering, drawn by the commotion. Ahead, the ridges seemed impossibly distant. "There," Nova called, pointing to a narrow crevice in the rock face to their left. "Shortcut through the formations." Thorne hesitated. Following her into a confined space seemed like the perfect opportunity for betrayal. But another glance at the growing pack of scavengers decided him. He nodded and changed course. The crevice was tight, barely wide enough for them to squeeze through sideways. The rock walls pressed close on either side, scraping against their protective gear. Thorne kept his weapon ready, half expecting Nova to turn on him at any moment. Instead, she led the way efficiently, navigating the winding passage with what seemed like practiced ease. "You've been in terrain like this before," Thorne observed, his suspicion growing. Nova didn't look back. Viridian Special Forces training includes extreme environment survival. "That doesn't explain how you know this specific planet's layout," he pressed. Before she could answer, the ground beneath them shuddered violently. Rocks crashed down from above, and the narrow passage began to collapse. "Run!" Nova shouted, pushing forward with renewed urgency. They sprinted through the collapsing corridor, ducking and weaving as chunks of stone rained down. Thorne felt something strike his shoulder, hard enough to make him stumble. Nova grabbed his arm, steadying him without breaking stride. They burst out of the crevice just as it completely caved in behind them, sealing off the passage and, thankfully, cutting off the pursuing scavengers. Both stood for a moment, catching their breath in the toxic air. That was well-timed, Thorn managed between gasps. Nova gave him an unreadable look. Lucky, she corrected. Before them stretched a vast plain scattered with the ruins of what appeared to be ancient structures, geometric shapes half buried in the planet's poisoned soil. And there, on the distant horizon, Thorn could make out what looked like a domed facility. The mining colony. "We need to keep moving," Nova said, checking her scanner again. "Radiation storm approaching from the west. If we hurry, we can reach the outpost before it hits." As they set off across the plain, Thorn couldn't shake the feeling that Nova knew more about this planet than she was letting on. The way she navigated the terrain, the precision of her predictions about its dangers, it all suggested prior knowledge. But why would a Viridian spy have detailed information about an uncharted, dying world in neutral space? "Those ruins," he said, gesturing to the geometric structures they were passing. "They're not natural formations." Nova's pace faltered slightly. "No," she admitted. "This planet was inhabited once, long ago." "By whom?" She hesitated, then said, "Some call them the precursors. They were advanced, far beyond either of our civilizations." "And they're gone now?" Thorn asked, studying the strange angles and impossible geometries of the ruins. Nova's gaze swept across the dying landscape. "Yes, but they left things behind, dangerous things." A chill ran down Thorn's spine that had nothing to do with the planet's harsh environment. "Things like what?" Before Nova could answer, a massive tremor shook the ground, far more powerful than the previous ones. Fissures opened in the earth, venting clouds of toxic gas. One crack raced toward them with alarming speed. "Jump!" Thorn shouted, leaping across the widening chasm. Nova followed, but the edge crumbled beneath her foot. She began to fall, arms flailing. Without thinking, Thorn lunged forward and caught her wrist. For a moment they hung there, human and Viridian, enemies forced into the most basic act of trust. Then, with a grunt of effort, he pulled her to safety. They collapsed on solid ground, breathing heavily. Nova looked at him with genuine surprise in her alien eyes. "Why did you save me?" she asked. Thorn wasn't sure himself. "Maybe I'm just not ready to be alone on this hellscape," he muttered. The mining facility was now clearly visible, its dome glinting dully in the angry light of the setting sun. But the radiation storm was closing in faster than expected, a wall of shimmering distortion sweeping toward them from the west. "We need to run," Nova said, already rising to her feet. "Now." As they raced toward the facility, with death chasing at their heels, Thorn wondered what other secrets this planet, and his reluctant companion, might be hiding. One thing was becoming increasingly clear. Surviving this world would require more than just an uneasy alliance. It would demand genuine trust between sworn enemies. The dust settled around them as they reached the outskirts of the abandoned mining facility. The radiation storm loomed closer, its deadly particles illuminating the sky in eerie, shifting colors. "Almost there," Nova said, her breathing labored. Thorn glanced back at the approaching wall of death, then at the Viridian beside him, the enemy who had somehow become his only hope for survival. "I still don't trust you," he said quietly. Nova's lips curved into the ghost of a smile. "Good, trust should be earned, not given." She paused, her alien eyes meeting his. "But today, perhaps we've made a start." As they raced toward the facility's entrance, the dying planet rumbled beneath them, a reminder that some enemies were greater than those we create ourselves. Whatever secrets awaited them inside, whatever truth Nova was hiding, would have to wait. For now, survival depended on their fragile alliance, forged in the harshest crucible of all. The heavy doors of the facility groaned open, offering shelter from the storm. Together, human and Viridian stepped across the threshold, into darkness and uncertainty. "Retry Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses."